While walking through the city with his daughter, the millionaire entrepreneur could never have imagined that a simple encounter would change their lives. When he sees a girl who looks exactly like his daughter, the child cries out, "Daddy, she's my sister." The mystery begins to take shape when he realizes that something strange is in the air. What seemed like a coincidence would reveal secrets that would transform what he knew about family, love, and wealth. It was a bright spring day in Munich when Friedrich Schumann was walking through the English garden with his 7-year-old daughter Emma. The sun sparkled on the surface of the Eisbach, and the first spring flowers adorned the expansive lawns. Friedrich was proud to finally be able to spend some time with his daughter. As a successful real estate magnate, he rarely had the opportunity to spend a whole day just with Emma. "Daddy, can we buy an ice cream?" Emma asked with her sparkling, gray-blue eyes, which she had inherited from her mother. Those eyes always reminded Friedrich of his late wife Katerina, who had been taken from him in a tragic accident 3 years ago. "Of course, sweetheart," Friedrich replied lovingly, stroking her blonde curls. "The ice cream truck is right up ahead." Hand in hand, they strolled over to the ice cream vendor. Emma jumped up and down excitedly as she examined the different flavors. Friedrich watched his daughter with a smile. She was his everything, the most precious gift Katerina had left him. After the loss of his wife, he had thrown himself into his work, expanding his real estate empire even further and becoming one of the richest men in Munich. But all the wealth couldn't fill the void in his heart that Katerina's absence had left behind. "I'll have chocolate and strawberry," Emma finally decided, pointing to the flavors. The ice cream vendor handed her the ice cream, and Friedrich paid generously. With their ice cream in hand, they continued walking through the park, past street musicians, joggers, and families enjoying the beautiful weather. Friedrich told Emma about his plans to take her to Neuschwanstein Castle over the weekend when she suddenly pulled her hand out of his. "Emma, where are you going?" Friedrich cried in alarm as his daughter ran off without warning. But Emma didn't listen to him. She ran purposefully toward a park bench where an elderly woman was sitting with a little girl. The girl was wearing a worn blue dress and appeared to be about the same age as Emma. She was feeding breadcrumbs to the ducks in the nearby pond. "Daddy! Daddy!" Emma cried excitedly, pointing at the girl. "She's my sister." Friedrich stood rooted to the spot. What was his daughter talking about? He didn't have another daughter. Emma was his only child. He slowly approached, ready to apologize for his daughter's strange behavior. But as he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. The girl on the bench turned around and Friedrich looked into a face that shook him to the core. Those gray-blue eyes, that heart-shaped face, even the little dimple on her chin. The girl looked exactly like Katerina. It was as if he were looking at a younger version of his deceased wife. "Excuse me," said the older woman, pulling the girl protectively toward her. "Do we know each other?" Friedrich could hardly speak. "No, I mean my daughter." He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, my daughter seems to think you're someone she knows." "I'm not her granddaughter," said the girl in a quiet but firm voice. "Mrs. Weber is my foster mother." "I'm Louise," she introduced herself, looking at Emma curiously. "Who are you?" "I'm Emma," Friedrich's daughter replied, still excited. "You look like my mom in the photos when she was little." Friedrich watched in disbelief as the two girls looked at each other. The resemblance was uncanny, not only to Katerina, but also to Emma herself, with the same nose shape and the same way of tilting her head slightly to one side when she thought. "Excuse me for interrupting," Friedrich said to the older woman. "I'm Friedrich Schumann, and this is my daughter Emma." "Helger Weber," the woman replied with a cautious smile. "And as Louise already said, I am her foster mother. We live in Hasenbergl." Hasenbergl, one of Munich's less affluent neighborhoods, far away from Friedrich's luxurious villa in Bogenhausen. "How old is Louise?" Friedrich asked, although he already knew the answer. "She is 7, Mrs. Weber replied. I've been taking care of her for 4 years. "My Emma is also 7, Friedrich said quietly. The two girls had meanwhile settled down on the park bench and were talking animatedly with each other as if they had known each other for years. Emma showed Louise her half-melted ice cream, and Louise offered her some of her bread for the ducks. "Your daughter seems to like Louise," Mrs. Weber remarked. "That's unusual. Louise is usually very shy around strangers." Friedrich couldn't take his eyes off Louise. May I ask how you became her foster mother? Mrs. Weber hesitated for a moment, then sighed. It's a sad story. A young woman came to me 4 years ago. She seemed desperate and said she couldn't take care of her child. She said her name was Anna, but later I found documents with the name Kara on them. Friedrich's heart began to race. Kara was Katharina's middle name, which she rarely used. She asked me to take care of Louise just for a few weeks, she said. But she never came back, Mrs. Weber continued. After a few months, I contacted the Youth Welfare Office and was eventually officially registered as a foster mother. Did this woman, Anna or Kara, ever say anything about Luisa's father? Friedrich struggled to keep his voice steady. Mrs. Weber shook her head, only that he wasn't in the picture. I never found out more. Friedrich watched the two girls, who were now laughing as a particularly brave duck, waddled straight toward them. His thoughts were racing. It was impossible. Katerina had not had a second daughter. He would have known, one way or another. Would they? Friedrich took a deep breath. Would you allow me to visit her and Louise sometime? Emma seems to get along so well with her, and he didn't know how to finish the sentence without sounding crazy. Mrs. Weber looked at him suspiciously. Why would a man like you, and I can see that you are wealthy, be interested in an old woman and a foster child from Hazenbergel? It was a legitimate question, and Friedrich knew he owed her the truth, or at least part of it. My wife died 3 years ago, he said quietly. And Louise, she looks incredibly like her. I know this sounds strange, but I would like to learn more about her. Mrs. Weber seemed to consider, then nodded slowly. All right, but we'll meet in a public place. Come to the cafe on Marienplatz at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Louise loves the shop windows there. Thank you, Friedrich said sincerely. We'll be there. As they said goodbye and Emma was reluctantly pulled away from her new friend, Friedrich couldn't stop thinking about the incredible encounter. Was it possible that Katerina had kept secrets from him? And if so, what did that mean for him and Emma? On the way home in his expensive Mercedes, Emma was unusually quiet. It wasn't until they were almost home that she asked, Daddy, why does Louise look like Mommy? Friedrich didn't know the answer, but he was determined to find one. I don't know, sweetheart, he replied honestly, but I promise you we'll find out. As they reached the driveway of their villa and the gardener nodded respectfully to them, Friedrich made a decision. He would do everything in his power to learn the truth about Louise, no matter where that truth might lead him. The night after the unexpected encounter in the English garden, Friedrich could hardly sleep. Again and again, he saw Louise's face before him, the striking resemblance to Katharina, the same eyes, the same smile. It was as if fate had played a cruel trick on him by showing him a child that his wife could have had, or perhaps actually had. The next morning, he sat in his spacious office on the top floor of one of the Schumann real estate skyscrapers in downtown Munich. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city and the Alps in the distance. But today, he hardly noticed the view. His gaze was fixed on his computer screen, where he was looking through old photos of Katharina. Mr. Schumann, his assistant Margot, knocked on the door. Your appointment with the investors from Hamburg is in 10 minutes. Friedrich barely looked up. Cancel it, Margot. I have something more important to do. But Mr. Schumann, you traveled here from Hamburg especially for this meeting. Let Mr. Becker take over, Friedrich interrupted. Tell him he has my full support for the project. Margot hesitated, then nodded and withdrew. In the 10 years she had worked for Friedrich, she had never seen him cancel an important appointment, except when Katharina fell ill. Friedrich opened a drawer and took out a small box. It contained Katharina's personal documents, her passport, her birth certificate, her diary. He had hardly looked inside since her death. The memories were too painful. Now he forced himself to do so and began leafing through the pages of the leather-bound diary. The first entries were from their time together as students at Ludwig Maximilian University. Katharina had studied art history, while Friedrich had taken economics and law. They had met in the university library when they were both looking for the same rare book. Friedrich smiled at the memory. Katharina had already been beautiful back then, with her gray eyes and infectious laugh. He continued leafing through the pages and stopped at an entry from November 2008, about 9 years before her death. Today I did it, it said in Katerina's curly handwriting. Dr. Muller from the fertility clinic was very friendly and explained everything to me in detail. The procedure wasn't as bad as I had feared. I know it will help couples who cannot have children themselves. The money will help me finance the semester without having to ask Friedrich for help. He wouldn't understand. Friedrich stared at the page. Egg donation. Katerina had donated eggs. She had never mentioned it. They weren't married at the time, but had been a couple for 2 years. Why had she kept it a secret from him? He hastily leafed through the pages, but found no further entries on the subject. The next few pages were about her studies, her growing relationship with Friedrich, and her dreams for the future. With trembling hands, Friedrich put the diary aside and reached for his phone. Margot, I need the address of Dr. Mueller's fertility clinic. Right away. Within an hour, Friedrich had the information. Dr. Mueller's fertility clinic was located in Schwabing, a trendy neighborhood in the north of Munich. Without hesitation, he grabbed his car keys and left the office. The clinic was housed in an elegant old building with a discreet sign at the entrance. Friedrich entered the modern bright lobby and approached the receptionist. I'd like to speak to Dr. Mueller, he said firmly. The young woman smiled politely. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's urgent. Tell him Friedrich Schumann is here. The name seemed to have an effect. The receptionist picked up the phone and spoke quietly into it. After a moment, she nodded. Dr. Mueller will see you in 10 minutes. Would you please take a seat in the waiting area? Friedrich sat down, too restless to pay attention to the magazines on display. His thoughts revolved around Katerina and the possibility that there was a child out there who was biologically connected to her, connected to Emma. Was Louise that child? Mr. Schumann, an elderly gentleman with gray hair and a friendly face, stood before him. I am Dr. Mueller. Please follow me. Dr. Mueller's office was tastefully decorated, with art prints on the walls and an impressive collection of medical books on the shelves. The doctor sat down behind his desk and folded his hands. How can I help you, Mr. Schumann? Your assistant mentioned something about information on an egg donation. Friedrich nodded. My late wife, Katerina Schumann, née Fischer, donated eggs here in 2008. I would like to know what happened to those eggs. Dr. Mueller frowned. As you are surely aware, such information is subject to confidentiality, Mr. Schumann. I cannot give you any information without your wife's consent. My wife has been dead for 3 years, said Friedrich, his voice breaking slightly, and I have reason to believe that there is a child out there who was conceived with the help of her eggs. The doctor was silent for a moment, then got up and went to a filing cabinet. Normally, I would not disclose this information, but given the special circumstances, I hesitated. You have a child with your wife. Yes, our daughter Emma. She's 7. Dr. Mueller nodded slowly. And you have reason to believe that there is another child who may be genetically related to your daughter. Friedrich told him about the encounter in the English garden, about Louise's striking resemblance to Katerina and Emma, about the name Kara in the documents Mrs. Weber had found. Dr. Mueller listened attentively. When Friedrich had finished, he opened a drawer and took out a thick folder. I remember your wife, he said quietly, a remarkable young woman, very determined. He leafed through the folder, then stopped at one page. Here it is, Katerina Fischer, egg donation in November 2008. He read on, and his face became serious. One of her eggs was successfully fertilized and implanted in a recipient. The pregnancy proceeded without complications, and in August 2009, a healthy girl was born. Friedrich felt dizzy. The child would now be about 7 years old. Yes, Dr. Mueller confirmed. However, he hesitated. The child's mother, the recipient, apparently had mental health issues. Child Protective Services got involved and, as far as I know, she lost custody of the child. Do you know what happened to the child? Dr. Mueller shook his head. That is beyond our jurisdiction. The records end with the birth. Friedrich leaned back and tried to collect his thoughts. Could you determine whether Louise, the girl I met, is actually this child? A DNA test, perhaps? I wouldn't recommend that. At least not right away, Dr. Mueller said cautiously. This is an extremely sensitive matter. The child probably has a difficult history. A sudden confrontation could be traumatic. I don't want to hurt her, Friedrich insisted. I just want to know if she really is Katerina's child. Dr. Muller closed the file. I understand your concern, Mr. Schumann, but consider the consequences. If this child is indeed the product of your wife's egg donation, what would that mean for her? For her daughter Emma, for the child itself. Friedrich had already asked himself these questions since he first saw Louise. What would it mean? Could he simply ignore her now that he knew she existed? Could he continue living as before, knowing that Katerina's second daughter was growing up in poor circumstances? I need to know, he finally said, not just for myself, but also for Emma. She lost her mother and now she thinks she has found a sister. Dr. Muller nodded slowly. I understand. In that case, I would suggest that you proceed with caution. First, build a relationship with the child and her foster mother. Once you have gained their trust, you can suggest a day test. Friedrich thanked the doctor and left the clinic with mixed feelings. He had found answers, but they only raised more questions. Why had Katerina never told him about the egg donation? Had she known that a child had been conceived? And if so, had she tried to make contact? As he drove through the streets of Munich, past elegant shops and historic buildings, his thoughts revolved incessantly around Katerina and the secrets she might have taken to her grave. He had to find out more, had to bring the truth to light for Emma, for himself, and for the little girl who might be Katerina's daughter. When he got home, he found Emma in the garden playing tag with her nanny. When she saw him, she ran towards him and threw herself into his arms. Daddy, where were you? Mrs. Backer said you had to work. Friedrich hugged her tightly. I had something important to do, sweetheart, but now I'm here. Emma let go of him and looked up at him with the same gray eyes he had seen so often today, in old photos of Katerina in Louise's face. Daddy, she said seriously, when will we see Louise again? She's my sister. I just know it. Friedrich stroked her hair. We'll meet her and Mrs. Weber on Saturday at Mariplatz. Emma's face lit up. Really? That's great. I want to show her my dolls and my room and the garden and the swimming pool. And Emma, Friedrich interrupted her gently, we'll just meet her at the cafe first. We need to get to know Mrs. Weber and Louise better. You understand? Emma nodded, although she looked a little disappointed. But she can visit us later, or maybe, Friedrich said cautiously. We'll see. As Emma ran back to her nanny to continue playing, Friedrich remained behind, deep in thought. He would wait until Saturday and then decide how to proceed. One thing was clear, however. If Louise was indeed Katerina's biological daughter, he would not rest until he knew the whole story. Saturday came faster than Friedrich had expected. Emma had been awake since dawn and could hardly sit still. She had tried on her prettiest dresses and finally decided on a light blue summer dress that accentuated her eyes. Do you think Louise will like my dress? She asked for the third time as they drove to Marienplatz in the Mercedes. I'm sure she'll love it, Friedrich replied patiently. He himself had opted for a casual look, jeans and a shirt instead of his usual suit. He didn't want to appear intimidating. As always on a Saturday, Marienplatz was bustling with life. Tourists were taking photos of the Gothic town hall, street musicians were playing, and the cafes were busy. Friedrich and Emma found a table outside the agreed cafe and ordered hot chocolate for Emma and an espresso for Friedrich. At 2 o'clock sharp, Mrs. Weber and Louise appeared. Louise wore a simple but clean floral dress that had obviously been washed many times. Her blonde hair was braided into a neat plait. When she saw Emma, a shy smile crept onto her face. Hello, she said quietly as they approached the table. Emma jumped up immediately. Hello, Louise. I brought you something. She pulled a small package out of her bag and handed it to Louise. Louise looked questioningly at Mrs. Weber, who nodded. She carefully opened the gift. It was a bracelet with colorful glass beads that Emma had made herself. This is for me? Louise asked incredulously. Yes, I made it myself, Emma explained proudly. Look, I have one too. She stretched out her arm to show an identical bracelet. Louise's face lit up. It's beautiful. Thank you. Friedrich watched the scene with a lump in his throat. The two girls looked even more alike side by side than when they first met. The same posture, the same way of smiling, even the same gesture of brushing their hair out of their faces. Please sit down, he said to Mrs. Weber, gallantly pulling out her chair. The older woman sat down with a grateful nod. She wore a simple brown suit that was carefully ironed but already slightly worn at the elbows. Friedrich guessed she was in her 60s with a friendly but weathered face. I took the liberty of ordering something already, Friedrich said. What would you like to drink, Luis? A coffee would be nice, replied Mrs. Weber. And maybe a cocoa for Luis. Friedrich placed the order, and soon they were all sitting around the table while the two girls chatted animatedly. Emma talked about her school, her hobbies, and her pony, which was stabled at a riding stable outside the city. Louise listened with wide eyes. Do you have a pony too? Emma finally asked. Louise shook her head. No, but I like animals. Sometimes I get to walk our neighbor's dog. Louise is very good with animals, confirmed Mrs. Weber. She has a special gift. Even shy cats come to her. Friedrich took the opportunity to find out more. Louise goes to school in Hassenbergel. Mrs. Weber nodded. Yes, at the elementary school on Edward Sprangerstrasse. She's an excellent student, especially in math and science. I hate math, Emma announced, and everyone laughed. Maybe Louise could help you, Friedrich suggested, when you two meet again. Emma clapped her hands enthusiastically. Yes, Louise can come to our house and help me with my homework. Friedrich noticed how Mrs. Weber stiffened. He understood her reluctance. She hardly knew him and had no reason to trust him or his motives. Maybe we could go on an outing next weekend, he suggested. To the zoo. Maybe if she and Louise have time. Before Mrs. Weber could answer, Louise interjected. Oh yes, please. I've never been to the zoo. Mrs. Weber sighed softly, then smiled. Well, the zoo sounds like a nice idea. As the girls resumed their conversation, Friedrich leaned toward Mrs. Weber. I'd like to know more about Louise's background, he said quietly, about the woman who left her with you. Ms. Weber looked at him searchingly. Why is that so important to you, Mr. Schumann? Friedrich decided it was time to be honest, at least partially. My wife Katharina died 3 years ago. Louise bears an amazing resemblance to her and to what you've told me about the woman named Anna or Clara. I think there could be a connection. Mrs. Weber was silent for a moment, then lowered her voice. There isn't much more to tell. She came to me on a rainy evening, soaked and desperate. She said she couldn't take care of her child, not for much longer anyway. She looked ill, very pale and thin. Friedrich's heart sank. Katharina had died of leukemia after a long, agonizing battle. What did she look like? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. Blonde, beautiful, with unusual eyes, gray with a hint of blue. Mrs. Weber replied. Like Louise, like her daughter. Friedrich closed his eyes briefly. Do you have any photos of her or anything she left behind? Mrs. Weber hesitated, then reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded envelope. I always hoped she would come back. That's why I kept everything. She opened the envelope and handed Friedrich a yellowed photo. It fell out of her bag when she left. She didn't notice it, but I did. I kept it. Friedrich stared at the photo and felt the ground being pulled out from under his feet. It showed Katharina laughing in the sun with the Munich Olympic Tower. It was a photo he had taken himself on one of their first dates. That's Katharina, he whispered. My wife. Mrs. Weber turned pale. Your wife? But that would mean... I don't know what it means, Friedrich interrupted her gently, but I'm determined to find out. He told her about his visit to the fertility clinic, about Katharina's egg donation and the child that had resulted from it. Mrs. Weber listened silently, her eyes wandering repeatedly to Louise, who was chatting happily with Emma. A DNA test would provide certainty, Friedrich finally said. And then what? Mrs. Weber asked directly. What would that mean for Louise? It was a question Friedrich had asked himself it again and again. I don't know for sure, he admitted. But if Louise is indeed biologically related to Katharina, then she is also related to Emma. They would be half-sisters, and I couldn't just go on living and pretend I didn't know. Mrs. Weber looked at him for a long time. You seem like a decent man, Mr. Schumann, but Louise has been with me for 4 years. She's like a granddaughter to me. I can't risk losing her. I'm not asking you to, Friedrich assured her. I just want to be part of her life, help her, offer her opportunities that you may not be able to offer her. Money isn't everything, Mrs. Weber replied firmly. I know that, Friedrich said quietly. I learned that the hard way when Katharina fell ill. All my money couldn't save her. Something in his tone seemed to convince Mrs. Weber. She nodded slowly. All right, I agree to a DNA test, but on one condition. No matter what the results are, you will respect my role in Luis's life. I promise, Friedrich said seriously. They were interrupted by Emma, who called out excitedly, Daddy, can we have ice cream? Luis has never tried pistachio before. Friedrich smiled. Of course. Let's go to the ice cream parlor. The rest of the afternoon passed in a harmonious atmosphere. The girls licked their ice cream. They strolled across Mariplatz, admired the glockenspiel at the town hall, and visited the nearby Bakalienmarkt. Friedrich watched as Louise took everything in with wide eyes, fascinated by the colors, smells, and hustle and bustle. It was obvious that she rarely came to the city center. When it was time to say goodbye, Friedrich and Mrs. Weber exchanged phone numbers. They agreed that a Dr. Friedrich knew would discreetly take DNA samples from Emma and Louise as part of a routine school examination, so as not to alarm Louise. Goodbye, Louise, Friedrich said as they parted. I'm looking forward to our visit to the zoo next week. Louise smiled shyly. Me too, Mr. Schumann. You can call me Friedrich if you like, he offered. Louise nodded seriously. Goodbye, Friedrich. As Friedrich and Emma walked back to their car, Emma was unusually quiet. What's the matter, honey? Friedrich asked. Louise doesn't have as much as I do, does she? Emma asked thoughtfully. Her clothes aren't as nice, and she's never been to the zoo. Friedrich was surprised by Emma's powers of observation. No, Mrs. Weber doesn't have as much money as we do, but that doesn't make her any less valuable, you understand? Emma nodded. I like Louise. She's smart and nice. Could she really be my sister? Friedrich took a deep breath. We'll find out soon, Emma, but even if she's not, you can still be friends. I want her to be my sister, Emma said firmly. Then it would be like getting a piece of mom back. Friedrich swallowed hard. Coming from a child's mouth, it sounded so simple, so clear. Maybe it was. Maybe Louise really was a gift, a final legacy from Katerina that he had only now discovered. Back at his villa, Friedrich couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. He went to his study and took out a bottle of expensive whiskey. With a glass in his hand, he stepped out onto the balcony, which offered a spectacular view of Munich. Somewhere out there in a modest apartment in Hasenbergl was perhaps Katerina's second daughter. The thought wouldn't leave him. He wondered if Katerina had known that her donated eggs had resulted in a child. Had she been looking for the child? Was that why she had been visiting friends so often in the last months before her death? So many questions, and Katerina couldn't answer any of them. Friedrich took a sip of whiskey and stared into the evening sky. He could only hope that the DNA test would provide clarity. And then, what would he do if Louise was indeed Katerina's biological daughter? He didn't know, but he was determined to do the right thing. For Emma, for Louise, and for the memory of Katerina, the love of his life, who may have taken more secrets with her than he could ever have imagined. The week leading up to the visit to Zorbe passed agonizingly slowly for Friedrich. The doctor had sent the DNA sample, discreetly as agreed, and Friedrich had used his contacts to speed up the results. He had hardly slept, couldn't concentrate at work, and spent his evenings leafing through old photo albums, looking for clues he might have overlooked. On Thursday evening, while Emma was already asleep, his phone rang. It was Dr. Berger, a geneticist friend who had performed the test. Friedrich, I have the results, he said without preamble. Friedrich sat down on the edge of his bed. His heart was racing. And it's positive, the girls are definitely related, half-sisters with the same biological mother. The match of the maternal day is indisputable. Although Friedrich had already suspected this, the confirmation hit him like a blow. He closed his eyes. Louise was indeed Katerina's daughter. Emma had a sister. Thank you, Marcus, he finally said. I appreciate your discretion. Of course. And Friedrich, what are you going to do now? The right thing, I hope, Friedrich replied and hung up. He went to the window and stared out into the darkness. Now there was no doubt. But many questions remained unanswered. Why had Katerina never told him about Louise? Had she even known that the child existed? And if so, why had she left her with Mrs. Weber instead of bringing her home? Friedrich couldn't sleep. Instead, he went to Katerina's dressing room, which he had hardly entered since her death. Her clothes were still hanging there. Her perfume stood on the dresser as if she were about to return at any moment. He carefully opened the drawers, searching through jewelry boxes and boxes, looking for anything that might provide a clue. In the far corner of the closet, under a pile of winter sweaters, he found a small, fabric-covered box he had never seen before. He opened it and found a diary he didn't recognize, more recent than the one he had already read. On the cover, in Katerina's handwriting, was written, "For Friedrich, when the time comes." With trembling hands, he opened the book and began to read. "My beloved Friedrich, if you are reading this, I am probably no longer with you. There is something I need to tell you, something I have been carrying around with me for a long time. I hope you can forgive me for not telling you sooner. Many years ago, when we had just met, I donated eggs to finance my studies. I never told you because I was ashamed somehow. Not because of the donation itself, but because I had money problems and was too proud to ask you for help. It didn't seem important to me at the time. 2 years ago, however, I received a letter from the fertility clinic. They informed me that one of my eggs had resulted in a child, a girl. The recipient had taken legal action to obtain information about the donor because she was suffering from a serious mental illness and feared she would not be able to care for the child. I was shocked, Friedrich. There was a child out there, my child biologically speaking, a child who was born at the same time as our Emma. Almost twins, separated by a strange twist of fate. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to tell you about it, afraid that it might jeopardize our happiness, our family. But I couldn't ignore the child either, so I started doing some research. I found out that the mother, a woman named Birgit Hoffman, had indeed lost custody and that the child had been placed in foster care for a time. I watched the girl from a distance, a beautiful little thing with your eyes. When my diagnosis came and I knew I didn't have long to live, I made a decision. I found Helga Weber, a kind, warm-hearted woman who lived alone and longed for a family. I observed her for weeks and was convinced that she would be a wonderful foster mother. Through contacts and with the help of some money I had set aside, I arranged for the girl Louise to come to Mrs. Weber. I pretended to be the mother, calling myself Anna to protect my identity. I wanted to tell you everything, Friedrich, really, but then I got sicker and the treatments became more intense, and I never found the right moment. Maybe I was too cowardly. If you read this, and if you somehow found out about Louise, I beg you to take care of her. Not to take her away from Mrs. Weber, who surely loves her, but to give her the opportunities that every child deserves. She is Emma's sister, and she is a part of me that will live on. Forgive me for my silence. Everything I did out of love. For you, for Emma, for Louise. With eternal love, Katerina." Friedrich put the diary down. Tears ran down his face. Katerina had known. She had found Louise and cared for her as best she could before she left. It was her last gift, her legacy. He spent the night reading the rest of the entries, detailed descriptions of Katerina's secret visits to Mrs. Weber, of her observations of Louise from a distance, of her hope that the two girls would one day meet. The next morning, he called Mrs. Weber. "I need to speak to you urgently," he said. "It's about Louise, about Katerina." Mrs. Weber was silent for a moment. "The results are in." "Yes, and more than that. Please, can we meet? Just you and me." They agreed to meet in a quiet cafe near Mrs. Weber's apartment. Friedrich took Katerina's diary with him. Mrs. Weber was already waiting when he arrived. She was wearing the same brown suit as last time, and her hands were nervously clutching a worn handbag. "So the girls are actually sisters?" she asked after they had ordered. Friedrich nodded. "Half-sisters. Yes, with the same biological mother as my wife Katerina." Mrs. Weber sighed deeply. "I had suspected it after what you told me, and because of the resemblance. But to know for sure." She looked him straight in the eye. "What does this mean for Louise now? For us?" Friedrich pushed the diary across the table. "Please read this. It explains everything." While Mrs. Weber read, Friedrich watched her face. Surprise, shock, understanding, and finally tears were reflected in her features. When she was finished, she gently closed the book and wiped her eyes. "Your wife was an extraordinary woman," she said quietly. "She chose me to look after her child." "Yes," Friedrich confirmed, "and she made the right choice." They were both silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. "I would like to make a suggestion," Friedrich finally said. I don't want to take Louise away from you. You are her family. And Katerina wanted it that way, but I want to be part of her life. I want to help her, to offer her opportunities she might not otherwise have. What exactly do you have in mind? Mrs. Weber asked cautiously. Financially, I would take care of everything. School, clothing, medical care, hobbies, whatever she needs. I would like to set up a trust fund for her future, and I would like to arrange regular visits. Maybe Louise could stay with us some weekends, or we could go on trips together. Mrs. Weber thought about it, and what about the legal situation? If you agree, I could seek some kind of unofficial adoption without affecting your rights as her foster mother. Louise would have two homes, one with you and one with Emma and me. That sounds complicated, Mrs. Weber remarked. Friedrich smiled slightly. Life is complicated, but we can make it work if we try. For the girls. Mrs. Weber looked at him for a long time. You're not what I expected, Mr. Schumann. When I first saw you, I thought you were just another rich man who thinks money can buy everything. I may have been that in the past, Friedrich admitted, but Katerina's illness and death changed me. I learned that the most important things in life cannot be bought with money, and yet they are offering me money. I am offering Louise opportunities, Friedrich corrected. I don't want to take away her home or her relationship with them. I want to open up new horizons for her. Mrs. Weber nodded slowly. How should we explain it to Louise? It was a valid question. Carefully, Friedrich said, we could start by simply saying that Emma and I like her very much and want to spend time with her. Over time, we could tell her more when she is old enough to understand. And tomorrow at the zoo, let's just have a nice day, Friedrich suggested. The girls will be happy to see each other again. We can discuss the details later. Mrs. Weber agreed, and they said goodbye with a new understanding for each other. As Friedrich returned to his car, he felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness about Katerina's secrets and that she was no longer there to explain her decisions. Hope for the future, for the two girls who now had the chance to grow up as sisters. When he got home, he sat down with Emma. Honey, do you remember Louise? He asked gently. Emma nodded eagerly. My sister. Friedrich smiled. Children sometimes had an intuitive wisdom that adults lacked. You were right, Emma. Louise is indeed your sister, your half-sister to be precise. Emma's eyes widened. Really? I knew it. Yes, and you know what? Mama knew it too. She made sure that Louise had a good home with Mrs. Weber. Is Louise coming to live with us now? Emma asked. Friedrich shook his head. No, sweetheart. Louise will continue to live with Mrs. Weber because they love each other very much. But she will visit us often, and we will spend a lot of time together. Emma thought for a moment. Like a divided family. Exactly, Friedrich confirmed. A large, unusual, but loving family. The next day they met as agreed at the entrance to Munich's Hellerbrunn Zoo. The girls were beside themselves with joy, and even Mrs. Weber seemed more relaxed than during their previous meetings. The day turned out to be one of the happiest Friedrich had experienced in a long time. They marveled at the elephants, fed the goats in the petting zoo, and laughed at the penguins, waddling around like little gentlemen in tailcoats and white shirts. As Friedrich carried Louise on his shoulders so she could see the giraffes better, and Emma ran alongside them, excitedly pointing at everything, he felt Katerina's presence more strongly than ever since her death. She would have been happy, he thought, happy to see her two daughters laughing together, like two parts of a whole that were finally united. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There was much to sort out, much to explain, but in that moment under the bright blue Munich sky, Friedrich felt hope for the first time in a long time. A hope that shone as brightly as the eyes of the two girls who had found each other, thanks to the infallible instinct of a child who had recognized the reflection of her mother in a stranger's face. In the weeks and months that followed, a new routine developed for the unusual family. Friedrich had kept his promise and made no hasty changes. Instead, he gently began to become part of Louise's life, while at the same time respecting Mrs. Weber's role as her primary caregiver. The first concrete step was to set up a trust fund for Louise that would secure her education and future. Friedrich insisted that Mrs. Weber receive monthly support, not as charity, he emphasized, but as recognition of her role in Louise's life. I can't accept this, Mrs. Weber had protested at first when Friedrich handed her the check. Please, he had replied, not for you, but for Louise, so that you don't have to worry about rent or groceries and can focus entirely on her. After some hesitation, Mrs. Weber finally agreed, but on the condition that part of the money be donated to charity so that Louise would learn that happiness does not depend on wealth, she explained. Friedrich admired her principles. Katerina had indeed found a worthy caregiver for her daughter. The next step was more complicated. After consulting with his lawyers and with Ms. Weber's consent, Friedrich applied for joint custody of Louise. It was an unusual arrangement, but feasible given the special circumstances and the DNA evidence. So, Weber remained Louise's primary caregiver and retained primary custody, while Friedrich was legally recognized as Louise's biological relative. On a sunny September day, about 3 months after their first encounter in the park, Friedrich stood in front of the elementary school in Hasenbergl and waited for Louise. It was her first day of school after the summer holidays, and he had a surprise for her. As the children streamed out of the school building, he looked for the familiar blonde head of hair. Louise hadn't noticed him yet as she chatted with a girl from her class. She was wearing the new school uniform Friedrich had bought her, discreet but of good quality, so that she didn't stand out too much from the other children. Louise, he called, and she turned around. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she ran towards him. Friedrich, what are you doing here? She had started calling him by his first name, which he liked. Dad would have been too much, too soon, maybe forever. Their relationship was different, but no less special. I thought we could do something special today, he said with a smile. Mrs. Weber has already approved it. What is it? Louise asked excitedly. A surprise. Come with me. He led her to his car where his driver was waiting. Louise had initially been shy about the amenities that came with Friedrich's lifestyle, the chauffeur, the housekeeper, the expensive restaurants. But over time, she had grown accustomed to them, although she never lost the natural modesty that Mrs. Weber had instilled in her. They drove into the city center, and Louise tried the whole time to get Friedrich to tell her where they were going. However, he remained steadfast and revealed nothing. Finally, they stopped in front of an imposing building near Odensplatz. We're here, Friedrich announced. Louise looked confused. What is this? The Bavarian International School, Friedrich explained. One of the best schools in Munich, and your new school if you want. Louise's eyes widened. But I already go to school with my friends. Friedrich knelt down in front of her to be at eye level with her. I know, dear, and if you want to stay at your old school, that's perfectly fine. But this school could offer you more opportunities. Languages, art, science. Emma also goes to school here. You'll be in the same grade, though not in the same class. Louise looked up at the building, then back at Friedrich. Can I take a look first? Friedrich smiled. Of course. That's why we're here. The headmistress is already waiting to give us a tour. They spent the next hour walking through the school's impressive facilities, bright classrooms, an extensive library, modern science labs, an art center, and extensive sports facilities. Louise was particularly fascinated by the library, where she gazed in awe at the shelves of books in different languages. So many books, she whispered, more than in the city library. The headmistress, Dr. Meir, an elegant, middle-aged woman, smiled. You like books, Louise? Louise nodded eagerly. I read every day. Mrs. Weber takes me to the library every week, and I'm always allowed to borrow 3 books. Here you could read as many books as you like, said Dr. Meir kindly. When they finished the tour, Friedrich asked, What do you think, Louise? Would you like to go to school here? Louise thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, I think so, but she hesitated. What's wrong? Friedrich asked gently. What about Mrs. Weber? She lives far away from here. Friedrich had expected these concerns. I've already talked to her about that. There's a school bus that would pick you up every morning and bring you back in the afternoon. And on the days you stay with Emma and me, you could walk to school together. And my friends from my old school, you can still see them. Maybe not every day, but we can arrange get-togethers, birthday parties, whatever you want. Louise thought about it, then beamed. Okay, I'll give it a try. Friedrich felt a wave of relief and joy. Wonderful, you'll start in January after the Christmas holidays. That gives you time to say goodbye and get ready. On the way back to Mrs. Weber's apartment, Louise was unusually quiet. Friedrich watched her in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay?" he finally asked. She nodded slowly. "It's just that everything is changing so fast. A few months ago, it was just Mrs. Weber and me. Now I have a sister, and you, and soon a new school." Friedrich understood her overwhelm. "Change can be scary," he said gently, "but sometimes it leads to wonderful things. And no matter what changes, one thing stays the same. Miss Weber and I both love you very much." Louise smiled slightly. "I know." When they arrived at Mrs. Weber's modest apartment, she was already waiting with a warm smile. "So how did you like the new school?" "It's huge," Louise exclaimed and began excitedly describing all the details. Friedrich watched as Mrs. Weber listened attentively, asked questions, and shared Louise's enthusiasm, even though he knew she had mixed feelings. The school meant that Louise would spend more time in Friedrich's world and less in hers. Later, when Louise was in her room, Friedrich spoke to Mrs. Weber about it. "You're worried," he said. Mrs. Weber sighed. "It's silly, I know. School is a wonderful opportunity for her, but you're afraid of losing her, Friedrich added. "You won't, Mrs. Weber. You are and will remain Louise's family. Nothing can change that. Not money, not an expensive school, nothing. The worlds are so different," Mrs. Weber said quietly. "Your villa in Bogenhausen, my little apartment here. At some point, she'll start to compare." Friedrich thought for a moment. "Maybe it's time to think about a change for both of you. What do you think?" "I own several properties in Munich," Friedrich explained, "including a nice apartment in Schwabing, closer to the school. 3 bedrooms, a garden, a quiet street. You could move there if you like. It would still be their home, their kingdom, but a little more comfortable, a little closer to us." Mrs. Weber was surprised. "You would give us an apartment?" "Not give," Friedrich corrected. "The apartment would be in Louise's name, managed in trust until she came of age. You would live there rent-free as her foster mother. It would be a home for both of you, safe and stable." Mrs. Weber thought for a long time. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" Friedrich smiled slightly. "I try too for the girls." "For the girls," Mrs. Weber repeated and finally nodded. "All right, I'll discuss it with Louise. If she agrees, we'll accept your offer." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Louise was enthusiastic about the idea of moving into a new apartment and eagerly helped with packing and planning. Friedrich arranged everything, the move, the renovation of the apartment according to Mrs. Weber's wishes, and the school registration. He was determined to make the transition as smooth as possible. At the end of October, the time had come. The new apartment was ready to move into. It was a spacious, light-filled old apartment with high ceilings, parquet floors, in a small but charming garden. Friedrich had insisted that Mrs. Weber choose all the furniture and decorations herself so that it would really feel like her home, not an extension of his world. On moving day, Emma and Friedrich came to help. The girls immediately divided up the task of arranging Louise's books on the new bookshelf, while Friedrich and Mrs. Weber set up the kitchen. "It's perfect," Mrs. Weber said quietly to Friedrich as they took a break and watched the girls play. "I never thought I'd move again at my age, but..." She looked around. "It feels right. I'm glad to hear that," Friedrich replied sincerely. They stood side by side in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the girls and both feeling the invisible presence of Katerina, who had made all this possible. "She would be proud," Mrs. Weber said suddenly, "of her, of the girls, of what we have created." Friedrich swallowed hard. "I hope so." "I know so," Mrs. Weber said with conviction. "Any mother would be proud to see her children so loved." At that moment, the girls came running up. "Can we order pizza?" Emma asked excitedly, "to celebrate the move?" "An excellent idea," Friedrich agreed, pulling out his phone. While they waited for the pizza, Louise showed them around her new room, which was bigger and brighter than her old one. She had her own bookcase, a desk, and a cozy bed with a canopy over it, a gift from Emma. "And look here," Louise exclaimed, opening the door to a small balcony. "I can see the stars when it's dark." Friedrich smiled. Louise had always been fascinated by the night sky. He made a mental note to get her a telescope for Christmas. Later, as they all sat around the new dining table eating pizza, Friedrich felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It hadn't been easy to get here. There had been discussions, compromises, and sometimes tensions. But now, as he looked at the smiling faces around the table, he knew they were on the right track. The new apartment was a symbol of what they were all striving for, a bridge between two worlds, a place where both girls could feel at home. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and full of love. As Friedrich drove home later that evening, Emma already asleep in the back seat, he thought about the incredible journey that had begun 4 months ago with a chance meeting in the park. He thought about Katerina and her quiet courage, the difficult decisions she had made, and the love she had felt for both her daughters. "Thank you," he whispered into the night as if she could hear him. "Thank you for leaving me this gift. I promise to take good care of it." And somewhere, perhaps in the gentle rustling of the wind or the distant twinkling of the stars that Louise loved so much, Katharina seemed to respond. Her presence was a warm, comforting breath in the cool autumn night. Winter passed, and with spring came a new phase in Louise's life. Her start at the Bavarian International School had gone better than anyone had expected. After initial shyness, she had quickly settled in, made friends, and impressed the teachers with her intelligence and enthusiasm. "Mr. Schumann, do you have a moment?" Dermir, the headmistress, waved Friedrich over as he picked up Emma and Louise from school on a Friday afternoon. The girls were to spend the weekend at the villa, as had become tradition. "Of course," Friedrich replied, and followed her into her office while the girls waited outside. "It's about Louise," Dermir began when they had sat down. "She is a remarkable child." Friedrich smiled proudly. "She is. Her math teacher, Ms. Berger, spoke to me yesterday. She believes that Louise is highly gifted, especially in mathematics and science. Her performance is well above average for her age group." Friedrich was surprised but not completely astonished. He had noticed Louise's quick comprehension and her love of books. "What do you suggest?" "We would like to register Louise for the Math Olympics, a nationwide competition for elementary school students. Normally, older students participate, but Ms. Berger is convinced that Louise has a good chance." "And what does Louise say about it?" Friedrich asked. Dr. Mir smiled. "She is enthusiastic about the idea, but we need her consent, and of course, that of Miss Weber." "You have my support," Friedrich said immediately. "I'll talk to Ms. Weber, but I'm sure she'll agree." When Friedrich told the girls about the conversation, Louise beamed with excitement. "Ms. Berger says I have a special way of looking at problems," she explained proudly. "She says I think outside the box, whatever that means." Emma giggled. "It means you're smart, silly." Friedrich watched the girls joke with each other without a hint of envy or rivalry. Emma had her own strengths. She was artistically gifted, loved music and dance, and seemed genuinely proud of Louise's academic achievements. It was a relief to Friedrich, who had initially feared that Emma's position as the only child might be shaken by Louise's arrival. As expected, Mrs. Weber fully supported Louise's participation in the Olympiad. "She's always loved number puzzles," she told Friedrich. Even as a small child, she saw patterns everywhere, in cobblestones, in flower beds, in the stars in the sky. In the weeks that followed, Friedrich watched Louise study with dedication for the competition. She had a natural discipline that reminded him of Katerina, the same quiet determination, the same ability to concentrate for hours on end. He often found her bent over complicated problems, her forehead creased, a small smile on her lips when she found the solution. Emma, although she detested mathematics, tried to help Louise by bringing her snacks and writing her encouraging notes. "You're going to win," she proclaimed confidently. "You're the smartest in the whole school." The day of the Olympiad finally arrived. It took place in Munich, in the imposing building of the Technical University. Friedrich and Mrs. Weber accompanied Louise together, while Emma stayed with Friedrich's sister. Louise was unusually quiet that morning, her face pale with nervousness. "What if I fail?" she whispered as they stood in front of the building. Friedrich knelt down in front of her. "You can't fail, Louise. No matter what place you come in, we're proud of you, simply because you're trying." "Exactly." Mrs. Weber agreed and stroked Louise's head. "It's not about winning, it's about the burst of learning and discovering." Louise nodded bravely and entered the building, where she had to part from them. Friedrich and Mrs. Weber spent the next 3 hours in a nearby cafeteria in tense silence. She's so young, Mrs. Weber finally said. Most of the participants are probably 2 or 3 years older than her. Friedrich nodded, but Dr. Meir and Mrs. Berger must have their reasons for nominating her. They see something special in her, just like we do. When Louise finally came out of the exam room, her face was unreadable. How was it? Friedrich asked cautiously. Difficult, she replied, but I think I solved most of the problems correctly. A small smile flitted across her face. The last one was particularly interesting, a task about honeycombs and geometry. The results would not be announced for another 2 weeks, but Friedrich had a feeling that Louise had done well. She seemed satisfied with her performance, and that was the most important thing for him. To celebrate, they went to the Deutsches Museum, Louise's favorite place in Munich. They spent hours exploring the scientific exhibitions, and Friedrich watched Louise's eyes light up with every new discovery. Ms. Weber photographed everything with a small digital camera that Friedrich had given her for Christmas and promised to make an album. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. Friedrich was in his office when his phone rang. It was Ms. Weber. Her voice trembled with excitement. She came in third place, she announced without further ado. Louise came in third place in all of Bavaria. Friedrich was speechless with pride. That's incredible. How is she? She's beside herself with joy, replied Mrs. Weber. She says she wants to use the prize money for something special. The prize money wasn't much, just a few €100, but to Louise it meant the world. It was the first time she had achieved something all by herself, something that had nothing to do with Friedrich or Mrs. Weber. Louise came to visit over the weekend, the award clutched tightly in her hand, a beaming smile on her face. Friedrich had prepared a special dinner with all her favorite dishes and even organized a little party. Emma had painted a banner. Congratulations to the smartest sister in the world. I'm so proud of you, Friedrich said when they were all sitting at the table. We all are. Louise blushed slightly. Thank you, but I've been thinking about the prize money. Oh, Friedrich raised an eyebrow. And what do you want to do with it? Louise took a deep breath. I want to set up a small library at my old school in Hasenbergel. They don't have many books there, especially not about science and math. I thought I could use the prize money to get started. Friedrich was speechless. He had expected her to ask for a telescope or maybe a computer, something for herself. Instead, she was thinking of other children, of opportunities that had not been available to her before she came into his life. That's a wonderful idea, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. In fact, if you'll allow me, I'd like to supplement your contribution so that the library will be something really special. Louise's eyes widened. Really? That would be great. I'll help too, Emma announced. I can paint pictures for the books. Mrs. Weber watched the scene with tears in her eyes. You are both extraordinary girls, she said softly. Your mother would be so proud. Over the next few months, the Louise Fisher Library at Hasenbergel Elementary School became a reality. Friedrich had initially hesitated to use Katharina's last name, but Louise had insisted. It's my name too, she had explained, the part of me that is connected to Mama. The library was small but nice, with custom-made bookshelves, cozy reading areas, and a carefully selected collection of books on science, mathematics, art, and literature. Emma had actually painted pictures that now adorn the walls, bright, cheerful depictions of children reading and learning. At the opening ceremony in the fall, Louise gave a short speech. Her voice was soft but firm. Books have opened up worlds to me that I would never have known, she said. I hope this library will give other children the same gift. Friedrich stood in the background, Ms. Weber and Emma at his side, watching Louise cut the red ribbon. His heart was filled with a mixture of pride, foam, and a strange kind of sadness. Sadness that Katharina was not here to see what an extraordinary girl her daughter had become. She's so much like you, he murmured to Mrs. Weber. Where did she get that from? Mrs. Weber smiled slightly. From her mother, I would say, and from the experiences she has had. Louise knows what it's like to have little. She doesn't forget that, even though her life is different now. Friedrich nodded slowly. It was an important lesson, one that he himself had learned late in life. Money alone did not shape character. Luis's generosity came from a deep empathy that had nothing to do with material wealth. After the ceremony, he hugged Luis tightly. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, "not because of the Olympics or the awards, but because of your heart." Luis smiled up at him, her gray-blue eyes, Katharina's eyes, full of light. "Thank you for showing me that I can help," she said simply, "that I can make a difference." At that moment, Friedrich realized that he was learning just as much from Luis as she was from him. She taught him to see the world with fresh eyes, to understand the true meaning of generosity, and to feel the joy that comes from giving, not from taking. On the way home, as the girls fell asleep in the back seat, Friedrich and Mrs. Weber exchanged a look of understanding. They were so different, the wealthy entrepreneur and the modest foster mother, yet connected by their love for Louise and Emma. Through two little girls, they had found an unexpected friendship, a shared purpose greater than their differences. "We did it," Mrs. Weber said quietly. "Didn't we?" "We really did it." Friedrich nodded. "Yes," he replied simply. "We did." And it was true. Despite all the obstacles, all the complications and unusual circumstances, they had created something special. A family defined not by traditional ties, but by love, respect, and a shared devotion to two extraordinary girls. When they stopped in front of Mrs. Weber's apartment, Louise woke up briefly. "Are we home?" she murmured, sleepily. "Yes," Friedrich replied gently. "We're home." And it was true, even though they were standing in front of one home and not the other, because home was no longer a single place for Louise or for any of them. It was wherever they were together, united by bonds stronger than blood or wealth or social conventions. Friedrich looked up at the night sky, at the stars that Louise loved so much, and whispered a silent prayer of thanks to Katharina for her wisdom, her love, and for the greatest gift of all, the chance to be part of the life of this remarkable girl who, with a single sentence, "Papa, she's my sister," had opened the door to a new world. A year had passed since that fateful day in the English garden. Summer was back, and the family was preparing for a special occasion, a trip to the Baltic Sea, their first extended vacation together. Friedrich stood on the terrace of his villa and watched Emma and Louise playing in the garden. The girls had become inseparable, despite their different interests and personalities, or perhaps because of them. Emma, lively and artistic, brought color and spontaneity to Louise's life. Louise, in turn, gave Emma structure and depth. She taught her perseverance and the joy of discovery. "They are like two sides of the same coin," remarked Mrs. Weber, who stepped up beside him, a cup of tea in her hand. She now visited often, feeling increasingly at home in Friedrich's house. The initial distance between them had turned into a deep, respectful friendship. "Yes," Friedrich agreed. "It's amazing to see how well they complement each other." "Like Katharina and her sister back then," Mrs. Weber said thoughtfully. "Have you ever tried to contact her?" "Hannelore, right?" Friedrich shook his head. "No, I couldn't find any current contact information in Katharina's files. The two had fallen out years ago, shortly before our wedding. Katharina never talked about it, and I respected her silence." Mrs. Weber nodded understandingly. Family conflicts were often complicated, and some wounds never healed. They were interrupted by the ringing of the telephone. Friedrich went in to take the call. When he returned, his face was pale. "What happened?" Mrs. Weber asked anxiously. "That was my secretary," Friedrich said slowly. "A woman called my office asking for me. Her name is Hanna Laura Fischer." Mrs. Weber gasped slightly. "Katharina's sister after all this time?" Friedrich nodded. "She's in Munich and wants to meet me tomorrow." The night was restless for Friedrich. He tossed and turned in bed, tormented by questions. Why was Hannelore coming now, more than 4 years after Katharina's death? What did she want? Did she know about Louise? The next day, he met her in a quiet cafe in the city center. He recognized her immediately when she entered, tall and slender like Katharina, with the same elegant gait, although her hair was darker and her eyebrows were gray-blue instead of brown. "Friedrich," she said when they sat down across from each other. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," he replied politely. "It's surprising to hear from you after all this time." Hannelore smiled sadly. "I know I should have come sooner after Katharina." She paused, but I couldn't. It was too painful. Why now? Friedrich asked directly. Honor took a deep breath. I heard from Louise, she said quietly, from Katharina's other daughter. Friedrich froze. How? Munich is smaller than you think, Hannah-Laure explained. I work for an educational foundation. We support gifted children from socially disadvantaged backgrounds. The Louise Fisher Library in Hasenbergel caught my attention. When I looked into it and saw a photo of the girl, she swallowed. She looks just like Katharina at that age. I knew immediately that she had to be her daughter. Friedrich was silent for a moment. Why did you two fall out, Katharina, and you? Hannah-Laure looked at her hands. It's a long story. Katharina got into trouble at university. She got involved with the wrong people, people who were dangerous. I tried to warn her, but she didn't listen to me. We had a big fight and said things we didn't mean. Then she met you and everything changed. She broke off contact with those people and concentrated on her studies and your relationship. But the rift between us, we were both too proud to take the first step. Those people, Friedrich asked cautiously, did they have anything to do with Louise? Hannah-Laure shook her head. No, I don't think so. The egg donation was earlier, before Katharina got involved with these circles. But I think her experiences made her cautious, suspicious. Maybe that's why she kept Louise hidden. Why she didn't tell you anything. Friedrich thought about it. It made sense. Katharina had always been somewhat reserved. She had a private side that even he didn't fully know. The idea that she had been involved with dangerous people in her youth was unsettling, but it explained her sometimes excessive caution, her occasional nervousness. Those people, he said slowly, are they still a threat? Hannah-Laure shook her head firmly. No, most of them are in prison or have left town. It was a group of petty criminals. Nothing really serious, but frightening enough for a young, naive student. She sighed. I wish Katharina had trusted me, had told me about Louise. I could have helped. She didn't trust anyone, Friedrich said quietly. Not even me. They were silent for a moment, both lost in thoughts of the woman they had loved and who had taken so many secrets with her. I'd like to get to know her, Hannah-Laure finally said. Louise and Emma, my nieces, if you agree. Friedrich looked at her thoughtfully. He saw sincerity in her eyes, a genuine longing for family. I think that would be possible, he said slowly, but we have to proceed with caution. Louise's life has already changed a lot in the last few months. They agreed that Hannah-Laure would come over for lunch on the weekend. Friedrich would talk to the girls and Mrs. Weber beforehand to prepare them. When he got home, he called everyone together. I met someone today, he began. Someone who is part of our family, Katharina and Louise's family. Louise looked up. Who? She asked curiously. Katharina's sister Hannah-Laure, to your aunt. Friedrich explained the situation in simple terms, that Hannah-Laure and Katharina had fallen out a long time ago, that she had now found out about Louise and wanted to get to know her nieces. Do I have an aunt too? Emma asked excitedly. Friedrich smiled. Yes, sweetheart. Ah, Hannah-Laure is also your aunt, since she was Mama's sister. Mrs. Weber watched the conversation silently, her face expressionless. Friedrich knew she was worried. Every new family member could mean that her place in Louise's life would become smaller. Mrs. Weber, he said gently, I hope you can be there Saturday too. You are an important part of our family. Her eyes moistened and she nodded gratefully. Saturday came, and with it Hannah-Laure. She brought gifts, a telescope for Louise, a set of watercolors for Emma, and a beautiful silk scarf for Mrs. Weber. The first encounter was marked by nervousness, but soon the atmosphere thawed. Louise was fascinated by her aunt, asking countless questions about Katharina as a child, about her school days, her hobbies. Hannah-Laure answered everything patiently and showed old photos she had brought with her. Katharina as a teenager, as a young woman, pictures that Friedrich had never seen before. She always loved to read, just like you, Hannah-Laure said as she showed a photo of Katharina in a library, and she loved the stars. We shared a room and she insisted that we sleep with the window open so she could see the night sky. Louise beamed. I love the stars too. Friedrich gave me a book on astronomy and sometimes I look at the moon with Mrs. Weber's binoculars. Then you'll like the telescope, said Hannah-Laure with a smile. Maybe one day I can show you the constellations. I know them all. Katerina taught them to me. Emma, unmatched in her enthusiasm, showed Hannelore her artwork and chattered about her ballet lessons. Hannelore listened attentively, asked questions, and laughed at the right moments. She had a natural way with children, a warmth that reminded Friedrich of Katerina. Mrs. Weber was reserved at first, but Hannelore's respectful manner toward her, the way she recognized and appreciated her role in Luisa's life, gradually caused her to warm up. By the end of the day, the two women were engaged in lively conversation about parenting methods and sharing stories about Luisa's childhood. When Hannelore said goodbye, she hugged everyone. Friedrich, too. Thank you, she whispered to him. Thank you for letting me into your lives. Thank you for coming, he replied sincerely. The girls need you. They need the connection to Katerina that you can give them. In the weeks that followed, Hannelore became a regular part of their lives. She lived in Augsburg, just an hour away from Munich, and came to visit often. She took the girls to the theater, to museums, and once even to an observatory, where Louise was allowed to look through a professional telescope for the first time, an experience she raved about for days. It was Hannelore who suggested visiting the place where it all began, the English garden, the bench where Emma had first seen Louise. We could make it an annual tradition, she suggested, a family reunion at the place that brought you together. And so it came to pass that on a glorious summer's day, exactly 1 year after that fateful encounter, they all met in the English garden. Friedrich and the girls, Mrs. Weber and Hannelore, united by the invisible bonds of love and fate. They spread out a picnic blanket right next to the bench where it had all begun. Emma had baked a cake with considerable help from Friedrich's cook, and Louise had written a little poem which she shyly read aloud. In this place a year ago, I found a sister wonderful. Two families became one, united in the sunshine of happiness. Mama is watching from above. Her smile gives us strength and peace. We will be forever grateful for this day in the sunshine. There was hardly a dry eye after this simple but profound performance. Friedrich hugged Louise tightly, overwhelmed with pride and love for this extraordinary girl who had entered his life so unexpectedly. The day passed with games, conversations, and lots of laughter. As the sun set and they made their way home, Emma suddenly asked, Dad, can we do this every year? All together. Friedrich looked at Mrs. Weber and Hannelore, who both nodded. Yes, he said, this is a wonderful tradition. Every year we will return here to celebrate how our family came to be. 10 years later, the English garden was as beautiful as ever. The trees were green and full, the sky bright blue. The extended family sat on the now familiar picnic blanket. Friedrich, now with a few gray strands in his hair, Mrs. Weber, whose face was marked by deep laugh lines, Hannelore, elegant as ever, and of course Emma and Louise, now young women of 17. Emma had developed into a talented artist. Her works were already being exhibited in small galleries. Louise, as expected, had turned to science. Astrophysics was her dream, and with her outstanding grades, she was in line for a scholarship to any university of her choice. I can't believe it's been 10 years, said Friedrich, as he watched the girls unpack the picnic. Time flies so quickly, agreed Mrs. Weber. Her health had declined somewhat in recent years, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She still lived in the apartment in Schwabing, although Louise now spent most of her time at the villa to be closer to her school. Look, Emma exclaimed, pointing to the bench. There you are, Mrs. Weber, with Louise. And you ran off like a wild thing, Friedrich recalled with a smile. I just knew, said Emma with a shrug. Sometimes you know things without knowing where they come from. Hannelore noticed a child's intuition. She had married a few years ago, a lovable widower with 2 children of his own, who got along wonderfully with Emma and Louise. The family had only grown larger and more colorful. Louise, who had been listening silently until then, cleared her throat. I've been thinking about something, she said slowly, about stars. The others looked at her curiously. In astrophysics, we learn that stars are created by explosions, violent cosmic events. Beauty is born out of chaos and destruction. She looked at Friedrich. When Mom died, it was like an explosion in our lives. But something wonderful came out of that pain. Our family, all of us, brought together by chance or fate or whatever you want to call it. Friedrich felt his heart contract and then expand, filled with a deep, almost painful love for this intelligent, sensitive girl. "You're right," he said quietly. Was turned into gain. Grief turned into joy. He looked around at the faces that had become so dear to him. "I was always a successful man, financially speaking. But it was only when I found you all, or you found me, that I understood what true wealth means." Mrs. Weber squeezed his hand. "True wealth lies in the relationships we nurture, in the love we give and receive, in the family we choose," Hannelore added. "And in the family that chooses us," Emma added, glancing at Louise. They sat together, enjoying the sun and each other's company, while life in the park went on as usual around them. Joggers ran by, children played, couples strolled, hand in hand. No one paid any attention to the unusual group on the picnic blanket, a group that at first glance looked like a perfectly normal family. And in a way, that's what they had become. Normal in their extraordinary nature, united by bonds stronger than blood or social conventions. A family born from a simple sentence spoken by a child with the unmistakable wisdom of innocence. "Dad, she's my sister. Fimda Historia." Dear listeners, we hope you were touched by the story of Friedrich, Emma, and Luis. To hear more moving stories like this, we have put together a special playlist, which you can find by clicking on the link on the left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to your comments.